All were attentive to the godlike man. Then from his lofty couch he thus began. Great Queen, what you command me to relate renews the sad remembrance of our fate. An empire from its old foundations rent, and every woe the Trojans underwent. A peopled city made a desert place, all that I saw and part of which I was. Not even the hardest of our foes could hear, nor stern Ulysses tell without a tear. And now the latter watch of wasting night, and setting stores to kindly rest in light. But since you take such interest in our war, and Troy's disastrous end desire to know, I will restrain my tears and briefly tell what in our last and fatal night befell. By destiny compelled and in despair, the Greeks grew weary of the tedious war, and by Minerva's aid a fabric reared, which like a steed of monstrous height appeared. The sides were planked with pine, they feigned it made for their return, and this the vow they paid. Thus they pretend, but in the hollow side, selected numbers of their soldiers hide. With inward arms the dire machine they load, and iron bowels stuff the dark abode. Inside of Troy lies Tenedos, an isle, while fortune did on Priam's empire smile. Renowned for wealth, but since a faithless bay, where ships exposed to wind and weather lay. There was their fleet concealed. We thought for Greece their sails were hoisted and our fears released. The Trojans, cooped within their walls so long, unbar their gates and issue in a throng. Like swarming bees and with delight survey the camp deserted where the Grecians lay. The quarters of the several chiefs they showed. Here Phoenix, here Achilles made abode. Here joined the battles, there the navy rode. Port on the pile their wondrous eyes employ, the pile by Pallas raised to ruin Troy. Tumultuous first it's doubtful whether hired, or so the Trojan destiny required. Moved that the ramparts might be broken down, to lodge the monster fabric in the town. But Caepus and the rest of sounder mind, the fatal present to the flames designed, or to the watery deep at least to bore, the hollow sights and hidden frauds explore. The giddy vulgar, as their fancies guide, with noise say nothing and in ports divide. Laocoon, followed by a numerous crowd, rained from the fort and cried from afar aloud. O wretched countrymen, what fury reigns, what more than madness has possessed your brains? Think you the Grecians from your coasts are gone, and are Ulysses' arts no better known? This hollow fabric either must enclose within its blind recess our secret foes, or it is an engine raised above the town, to overlook the walls and then to batter down. Somewhat is sure designed by fraud or force. Trust not their presence, nor admit the horse. Thus having set against the steed he threw his forceful spear, which, hissing as it flew, pierced through the yielding planks of jointed wood, and trembling in the hollow belly stood. The sides transpierced return a rattling sound, and groans of the Greeks enclosed come issuing through the wound. And had not the heaven the fall of Troy designed, or had not men been fated to be blind, enough was said and done to inspire a better mind. Then had our lances pierced the treacherous wood, and Aeolian towers and Priam's empire stood. Meantime, with shouts the Trojan shepherds bring a captive Greek in bands before the king, taken to take who made himself their prey, to impose on their belief and Troy betray. Fixed on his aim and obstinately bent, to die undaunted or to circumvent. About the captive tides of Trojans flow, all pressed to see and some insult the foe. Now hear how well the Greeks their wiles disguised. Behold a nation in a man comprised. Trembling the miscreant stood, unarmed and bound. He stared and rolled his haggard eyes around. Then said, Alas, what earth remains, what sea is open to receive unhappy me? What fate a wretched fugitive attends, scorned by my foes, abandoned by my friends? He sat and sighed, and cast a rueful eye. Our pity kindles and our passions die. We cheer youth to make his own defense, and freely tell us what he has and whence. What news he could import we long to know, and what to credit from a captive foe. His fear at length dismissed, he said, Whatever my fate ordains, my words shall be sincere. I neither can nor dare my birth disclaim. Greece is my country, Simon is my name. Though plunged by fortune's power in misery, it is not in fortune's power to make me lie. If any chance has hither brought the name of Palamedes not unknown to fame, who suffered from the malice of the times, accused and sentenced for pretended crimes, because these fatal wars he would prevent, whose death the wretched Greeks too late lament. Me then a boy, my father, poor and bare, of other means committed to his care, his kinsman and companion in the war, while fortune favored, while his arms support the cause and ruled the councils of the court. I made some figure there, nor was my name obscure, nor I without my share of fame. But when Ulysses, with fallacious words, had made impression in the people's hordes, and forged a treason in my patron's name, I speak of things too far divulged by fame. My kinsman fell, then I, without support, in private mourned his loss and left the court. Mad as I was, I could not bear his fate with silent grief, but loudly blamed the state, and cursed the direful author of my wounds. It was told again, and hence my ruin rose. I threatened, if indulgent heaven once more would land me safely on my native shore, his death with double vengeance to restore. This moved the murderer's hate, and soon ensued the effects of malice from a man so proud. Ambiguous rumors through the camp he spread, and sought by treason my devoted head. New crimes invented, left unturned no stone, to make my guilt appear and hide his own. Till Calchas was by force and threatening wrought. But why dwell I on that anxious thought? If on my nation just revenge you seek, and 'tis to appear a foe, to appear a Greek. Already you my name and country know. Assuage your thirst of blood and strike the blow. My death will both the kingly brothers please, and set insatious Ithacus at ease. This fair unfinished tale, these broken swords, raised expectations in our longing hordes, unknowing as we were in Grecian orts. His former trembling once again renewed, with acted fear the villain thus pursued. Long had the Grecians, tired with fruitless care, and wearied with an unsuccessful war, resolved to raise the siege and leave the town, and, had the gods permitted, they had gone. But oft the wintry seas and southern winds withstood their passage home and changed their minds. Portents and prodigies their souls amazed, but most when this stupendous pile was raised. Then flaming meteors hung in air were seen, and thunders rattling through a sky serene. Dismayed and fearful of some dire event, Eurypylus to inquire their fate was sent. He from the gods this dreadful answer brought. O Grecians, when the Trojan shores you sought, your passage with a virgin's blood was bought. So must your safe return be bought again, and Grecian blood once more atone the main. The spreading rumor round the people ran, all feared and each believed himself the man. Ulysses took the advantage of their fright, called Calchas and produced in open sight. Then bade him name the wretch ordained by fate, the public victim to redeem the state. Already some presaged the dire event, and saw what sacrifice Ulysses meant. For twice 5 days the good old seer withstood the intended treason and was dumb to blood, till tired with endless clamors and pursuit of Ithacus, he stood no longer mute. But, as it was agreed, pronounced that I was destined by the wrathful gods to die. All praised the sentence, pleased the storm should fall on one alone whose fury threatened all. The dismal day was come, the priests prepare their leavened cakes and fillets for my hair. I followed nature's laws and must avow I broke my bonds and fled the fateful blow. Hid in a weedy lake all night I lay, secure of safety when they sailed away. But now what further hopes for me remain? To see my friends or native soil again, my tender infants or my careful sire, whom they returning will to death require, will perpetrate on them their first design, and take the forfeit of their heads for mine. Which, oh, if pity mortal minds can move, if there be faith below or gods above, if innocence and truth can claim desert, ye Trojans from an injured wrath avert. False tears, true pity move, the king commands. to loose his feathers and unbind his hands. Then adds these friendly words: dismiss thy fears, forget the Greeks, be mine as thou wert theirs. But truly tell, was it for force or guile, or some religious end you raised the pile? Thus said the king, he full of fraudful words, this well-invented tale for truth imports. Ye lamps of heaven, he said, and lifted high his hands now free through venerable sky. Inviolable powers adored with dread, ye fatal fillets that once bound this head, ye sacred altars from whose flames I fled, be all of you adjured and grant I may, without a crime, the ungrateful Greeks betray. Reveal the secrets of the guilty state, and justly punish whom I justly hate. But you, O king, preserve the faith you gave, if I to save myself your empire save. The Grecian hopes and all the attempts they made were only founded on Minerva's aid, but from the time when impious Diomede and false Ulysses that invented had her fatal image from the temple drew, the sleeping guardians of the castle slew, her virgin statue with their bloody hands polluted and profaned her holy bands. From thence the tide of fortune left their shore, and ebbed much faster than it flowed before. Their courage languished as their hopes decayed, and Pallas, now averse, refused her aid. Nor did the goddess doubtfully declare her altered mind and alienated care. When first her fatal image touched the ground, she sternly cast her glaring eyes around, that sparkled as they rolled and seemed to threat. Her heavenly limbs distilled a briny sweat. Thrice from the ground she leaped, was seen to wield her brandished lance and shake her horrid shield. Then Calchas bade our host for flight, and hoped no conquest from the tedious war, till first they sailed for Greece with prayers besought, her injured power and better omens brought. And now their navy plows the watery main, yet soon expected on your shores again, with Pallas pleased, as Calchas did ordain. But first to reconcile the blue-eyed maid, for her stolen statue on a tower betrayed. Warned by the seer to offended name, we raised and dedicate this wondrous frame, so lofty, lest through your forbidden gates it pass and intercept our better fates. For once admitted there, our hopes are lost, and Troy may then a new Palladium boast. For so religion and the gods ordain, that if you violate with hands profane, Minerva's gift your town in flames shall burn, which omen, O ye gods, on Grecia turn. But if it climb with your assisting hands the Trojan walls and in the city stands, then Troy shall Argos and Mycenae burn, and the reverse of fate on us return. With such deceits he gained their easy hearts, too prone to credit his perfidious arts. What Diomede nor Thetis' greater son 1,000 ships nor 10 years' siege had done, false tears and fawning words the city won. A greater omen and of worse portent did our unwary minds with fear torment, concurring to produce the dire event. Laocoon, Neptune's priest by lot that year, with solemn pomp then sacrificed the steer, when, dreadful to behold, from sea we spied two serpents ranked abreast the sea's divide, and smoothly sweep along the swelling tide. Their flaming crests above the waves they show, their bellies seems to burn the seas below. Their speckled tails advance to steer their course, and on the sounding shore their flying billows force. And now the strand and now the plain they held, their ardent eyes with bloody streaks were filled. Their nimble tongues they brandished as they came, and licked their hissing jaws that sputtered flame. We fled, amazed, their destined way they take, and to Laocoon and his children make. And first around the tender boys they wind, then with their sharpened fangs their limbs and bodies grind. The wretched father running to their aid, with pious haste, but vain they next invade. Twice round his waist their winding volumes rolled, and twice about his gasping throat they fold. The priest thus doubly choked their crest divide, and towering over his head in triumph ride. With both his hands he labors at the knots, his holy fillets the blue venom blots. His roaring fills the flitting air around. Thus, when an ox received a glancing wound, he breaks his bands, the fatal altar flies, and with loud bellowings breaks the yielding skies. Their tasks performed, the serpent quit their prey, and to the tower of Pallas make their way. Couched at her feet they lie protected there, by her large buckler and pretended spear. Amazement seizes all, the general cry proclaims Laocoon justly doomed to die, whose hands the will of Pallas had withstood, and dared to violate the sacred wood. And vote to admit the steed that vows be paid, and incense offered to the offended maid. As spacious breaches made, the town lies bare, some hoisting levers, some the wheels prepare, and fasten to the horse feet the rest, with cables haul along the unwieldy beast. Each on his fellow for assistant calls, at length the fatal fabric mounts the walls. Big with destruction, boys with chaplets crowned, and choirs of virgins sing and dance around. Thus raised aloft and then descending down, it enters over our heads and threats the town. O sacred city built by hands divine, O valiant heroes of the Trojan line. 4 times he struck, as oft the clashing sound of arms was heard, and inward groans rebound. Yet, mad with zeal and blinded with our faith, we haul along the horse in solemn state. Then place the dire portent within the tower. Cassandra cried and cursed the unhappy hour. Foretold or fate, but by the gods' decree, all heard and none believed the prophecy. With branches we the fanes adorn and waste in jollity the day ordained to be the last. Meantime, the rapid heavens rolled down the light, and on the shaded ocean rushed the night. O'er men, secure, nor guards nor sentries held, but easy sleep their weary limbs compelled. The Grecians had embarked their naval powers from Tenedos and sought our well-known shores. Safe under cover of the silent night, and guided by the imperial galley's light, when Simon, favored by the partial gods, unlocked the horse and opened his dark abodes, restored to vital air our hidden foes, who joyful from their long confinement rose, to center bold Antilenus their guide, and dire Ulysses down the cable slide. Then Thoas, Atamas, and Pyrrhus haste, nor was the Podalirian hero last, nor injured Menelaus, nor the famed Aepius who the fatal engine framed. A nameless crowd succeed their forces joined, to invade the town oppressed with sleep and wine. Those few they find awake first meet their fate, then to their fellows they unbar the gate. It was in the dead of night, when sleep repairs our bodies worn with tools, our mind with cares, when Hector's ghost before my sight appears. A bloody shroud he seemed, and bathed in tears, such as he was when, by Pelides slain, the Thessalian coursers dragged him over the plain. Swollen were his feet as when the thongs were thrust through the bored holes, his body black with dust. Unlike that Hector who returned from toils of war triumphant in Achaean spoils, or him who made the fainting Greeks retire and launched against their navy Phrygian fire. His hair and beard stood stiffened with his gore, and all the wounds he for his country bore now streamed afresh and with new purple ran. I wept to see the visionary man, and while my trance continued, thus began. O light of Trojans and support of Troy, thy father's champion and thy country's joy, O long expected by their friends, from whence art thou so late returned for our defence? Do we behold thee, wearied as we are, with lengths of labor and with toils of war, after so many funerals of thy own, art thou restored to thy declining town? But say, what wounds are these, what new disgrace deforms the manly features of thy face? To this the spectre no reply did frame, but answered to the cause for which he came, and, groaning from the bottom of his breast, this warning in these mournful words expressed. O goddess born, escape by timely flight the flames and horrors of this fatal night. The foes already have possessed the wall. Troy nods from high and totters to her fall. Enough is paid to Priam's royal name, more than enough to duty and to fame. If by mortal hand my father's throne could be defended, it was by mine alone. Now Troy to thee commends her future state, and gives her God's companions of thy fate. From their assistance walls expect, which, wandering long, as last thou shalt erect. He said, and brought me from their blessed abodes the venerable statues of the gods, with ancient Vesta from the sacred choir, the wreaths and relics of the immortal fire. Now peals of shouts come thundering from afar, cries, threats, and loud laments and mingled war. The noise approaches, to our palace stood, aloof from streets encompassed with a wood. Louder, and yet more loud, I hear the alarms of human cries, distinct and clashing arms. Fear broke my slumber, I no longer stay, but mount the terrace, thence the town survey, and hearken what the frightful sounds convey. Thus, when a flood of fire by wind is borne, crackling it rolls and mows the standing corn, or deluges descending on the plains, sweep over the yellow year, destroy the pains of laboring oxen and the peasants' gains. Unroot the forest oaks and bear away flocks, fowls, and trees and undistinguished prey. The shepherd climbs the cliff and sees from far the wasteful ravage of the watery war. Then Hector faint was manifestly cleared, and Grecian frauds in open light appeared. The palace of Deiphobus ascends in smoky flames and catches on his friends. Eucaligon burns next, the seas are bright, with splendor not their own, and shine with Trojan light. New clamors and new clangors now arise, the sound of trumpets mixed with fighting cries. With frenzy seized I run to meet the alarms, resolved on death, resolved to die in arms. But first to gather friends with them oppose, if fortune favored, and repel the foes. Spurred by my courage, by my country fired, with sense of honor and revenge inspired. Pantheus, Apollo's priest, a sacred name, had scaped the Grecian swords and passed the flame. With relics loaden to my doors he fled, and by the hand his tender grandson led. What hope, O Pantheus? Whither can we run? Where make a stand, and what may yet be done? Scarce had I said, when Pantheus with a groan, Troy is no more, and Ilium was a town. The fatal day, the appointed hour is come, when wrathful Jove's irrevocable doom transfers the Trojan state to Grecian hands. The fire consumes the town, the foe commands. And armed hosts, an unexpected force, break from the bowels of the fatal horse. Within the gates, proud Simon throws about, the flames and foes for entrance press without. With 1,000 others whom I fear to name, more than from Argos or Mycenae came, to several posts their parties they divide. Some block the narrow streets, some scour the wide. The bold they kill, the unwary they surprise. Who fights finds death, and death finds him who flies. The warders of the gate but scarce maintain the unequal combat and resist in vain. I heard, and heaven, that well-born souls inspires, prompts me through lifted swords and rising fires, to run where clashing arms and clamor calls, and rush undaunted to defend the walls. Ripheus and Iphitus by my side engage, for valor one renowned and one for age. Dymas and Hypanis by moonlight knew my motions and my mien, and to my party drew, with young Corybus, who by love was led to win renown and fair Cassandra's bed, and lately brought his troops to Priam's aid, forewarned in vain by the prophetic maid, whom when I saw resolved in arms to fall, and that one spirit animated all. Brave souls, said I, but brave, alas, in vain. Come, finish what our cruel fates ordain. You see the desperate state of our affairs, and heaven protecting powers are deaf to prayers. The passive gods behold the Greeks defile their temples and abandon to the spoil their own abodes. We feeble few conspire to save a sinking town involved in fire. Then let us fall, but fall amidst our foes. Despair of life the means of living shows. So bold a speech encouraged their desire of death, and added fuel to their fire. As hungry wolves, with raging appetite, scour through the fields, nor fear the stormy night, their whelps at home expect the promised food, and long to temper their dry chaps in blood. So rushed we forth at once, resolved to die, resolved in death the last extremes to try. We leave the narrow lanes behind and dare the unequal combat in the public square. Night was our friend, our leader was despair. What tongue can tell the slaughter of that night? What eyes can weep the sorrows and affright? An ancient and imperial city falls, the streets are filled with frequent funerals. Houses and holy temples float in blood, and hostile nations make a common flood. Not only Trojans fall, but in their turn the vanquished triumph and the victors mourn. Ours take new courage from despair and night. Confused the fortune is, confused the fight. All ports resound with tumults, plaints and fears, and grisly death in sundry shapes appears. And Vergil fell among us with his band, who thought us Grecians newly come to land. From whence, said he, my friends, this long delay? You loiter while the spoils are borne away. Our ships are laden with the Trojan store, and you, like Troans, come too late ashore. He said, but soon corrected his mistake, found by the doubtful answers which we make. Amazed, he would have shunned the unequal fight, but we, more numerous, intercept his flight. As when some peasant in a bushy brake has with unwary footing pressed a snake, he starts aside astonished when he spies his rising crest, blue neck, and rolling eyes. So from all arms surprised and Vergil flies. In vain for him and his we compassed round, possessed with fear, unknowing of the ground, and of their lives an easy conquest found. Thus fortune on our first endeavor smiled, Coebus then with youthful hopes beguiled, swollen with success and a daring mind, this new invention fatally designed. My friends, said he, since fortune shows the way, 'tis fit we should the auspicious guide obey. For what has she these Grecians' arms bestowed, but their destruction and the Trojan good? Then change we shields and their devices bear, let fraud supply the want of force in war. They find us arms, this said, himself he dressed in dead and dubious spoils, his upper vest, his painted buckler and his plumy crest. Thus refuse, Dymas, all the Trojan train, lay down their own attire and strip the slain. Mixed with the Greeks we go with ill presage, flattered with hopes to glut our greedy rage. Unknown, assaulting whom we blindly meet, and strew with Grecian carcasses the street. Thus, while their straggling parties we defeat, some to the shore and safer ships retreat, and some, oppressed with more ignoble fear, remount the hollow horse and pant in secret there. But what use of valor can be made when heaven propitious powers refuse their aid? Behold the royal prophetess, the fair Cassandra, dragged by her disheveled hair, whom not Minerva's shrine nor sacred bands in safety could protect from sacrilegious hands. On heaven she cast her eyes, she sighed, she cried, it was all she could, her tender arms were tied. So sad a sight Coebus could not bear, but, fired with rage, distracted with despair, amid the barbarous ravagers he flew, our leader's rash example we pursue. But storms of stones from the proud temple's height pour down and on our battered helms alight. We from our friends received this fatal blow, who thought us Grecians as we seemed in show. They aim at the mistaken crests from high, and ours beneath the ponderous ruin lie. Then, moved with anger and disdain to see their troops disperse, the royal virgin free, the Grecians rally and their powers unite, with fury charge us and renew the fight. The brother kings with Ajax join their force, and the whole squadron of the Thessalian horse. Thus, when the rival wins their quarrel try, contending for the kingdom of the sky, south, east, and west on airy coursers borne, the whirlwinds gathers and the woods are torn. Then Nereus strikes the deep, the billows rise, and mixed with ooze and sand pollute the skies. The troops we squandered first again appear, from several quarters and enclose the rear. The first observe, and to the rest betray our different speech, our bold arms survey. Oppressed with odds we fall, Coebus first, at Pallas' altar by Peneleus pierced. Then Rheseus followed, in the unequal fight, just of his word observant of the right. Heaven thought not so. Doom as their fate attends, would be Panis mistaken by their friends. Nor Pantheus, thee, thy meter, nor the bands of awful Phoebus saved from impious hands. Ye Trojan flames your testimony bear, what I performed and what I suffered there. No sword avoiding in the fatal strife, exposed to death and prodigal of life. Witness, ye heaven, I live not by my fault. I strove to have deserved the death I sought. But when I could not fight and would have died, borne off to distance by the growing tide, old Iphitus and I were hurried thence, with Peleus wounded and without defence. New clamours from the invested palace ring, we run to die or disengage the king. So hot the assault, so high the tumult rose, while ours defend and while the Greeks oppose, as all the Dortan and Argolic race had been contracted in that narrow space, or as all Ilium else were void of fear, and tumult, war, and slaughter only there. Their targets in a tortoise cast the foes, secure advancing to the turret's rows. Some mount the scaling ladders, some more bold, swerve upwards and by posts and pillars hold. Their left hand gripes their bucklers in the ascent, while with the right hand they seize the battlement. From their demolished towers the Trojans throw huge heaps of stones that, falling, crush the foe, and heavy beams and rafters from the sides. Such arms their last necessity provides, and gilded roofs come tumbling from on high, the marks of state and ancient royalty. The guards below, fixed in the pass, attend the charge undaunted and the gate defend. Renewed in courage, with recovered breath, a second time we ran to tempt our death. To clear the palace from the foe, succeed, the weary living revenge the dead. A postern door, yet unobserved and free, joined by the length of a blind gallery, to the king's closet led, a way well known to Hector's wife, while Priam held the throne, through which she brought Astyanax unseen, to cheer his grandsire and his grandsire's queen. Through this we pass and mount the tower, from whence, with unavailing arms, the Trojans make defence. From this the trembling king had oft descried the Grecian camp and saw their navy ride. Beams from its lofty heights with swords we hew, then wrenching with our hands the assault renew, and where the rafters and the columns meet, we push them headlong with arms and feet. The lightning flies not swifter than the fall, nor thunder louder than the ruined wall. Down goes the top at once, the Greeks beneath are piecemeal torn or pounded into death. Yet more succeed and more to death are sent. We cease not from above, nor they below relent. Before the gate stood Pyrrhus, threatening loud, with glittering arms conspicuous in the crowd. So shines, renewed in youth, the crested snake, who slept the winter in a tawny brake, and, casting off his slough when spring's returns, now looks aloft and with new glory burns. Restored with poisonous herbs his orton sides, reflect the sun, and raised on spires he rides. High over the grass, hissing he rolls along, and brandishes by fits his forky tongue. Proud Periphas and fierce Automedon, his father's charioteer, together run to force the gate. The Scyrian infantry rush on in crowds and the board passage free. Entering the court with shouts, the skies they rend, and flaming firebrands to the roofs ascends. Himself among the foremost deals his blows, and with his axe repeated strokes the stones. On the strong doors then all their shoulders ply, till from the posts the brazen hinges fly. All hews apace, the double boars at length yield to his axe and unresisted strength. A mighty breach is made, the rooms concealed appear, and all the palace is revealed. The halls of audience and of public state, and with a lonely queen in secret sate. Armed soldiers now by trembling maids are seen, with not a door and scarce a space between. The house is filled with loud laments and cries, and shrieks of women rend the vaulted skies. The fearful matrons run from place to place, and kiss the thresholds and the posts embrace. The fatal work inhumane Pyrrhus plies, and all his father's sparkles in his eyes. Nor boars nor fighting gourds his force sustain, the boars are broken and the gourds are slain. In rush the Greeks, and all the apartments fill. Those few defendants whom they find they kill. Not with so fierce a rage the foaming flood roars when he finds his rapid course withstood, bears down the dams with unresisted sway, and sweeps the cattle and the carts away. These eyes beheld him when he marched between the brother kings. I saw the unhappy queen, the 100 wives, and where old Priam stood to stain his hallowed altar with his brood. The 50 nuptial beds, such hopes he had, so large a promise of a progeny. The posts of plated gold and hung with spoils fell the reward of the proud victor's toils. Wherever the raging fire had left a space, the Grecians enter and possess the place. Perhaps you may of Priam's fate inquire. He, when he saw his regal town on fire, his ruined palace and his entering foes, on every side inevitable woes, in arms disused, in vests his limbs decayed, like them with age, a late and useless aid. His feeble shoulders scarce the weight sustain, loaded, not armed, he creeps along with pain, despairing of success, ambitious to be slain. Uncovered but by heaven there stood in view an altar near the hearth, a laurel grew, dotted with age, whose boughs encompassed round the household gods and shade the holy ground. Here Hecuba, with all her helpless train of dames, for shelter sought, but sought in vain. Driven like a flock of doves along the sky, their images they hawk and to their altars fly. The queen when she beheld her trembling lord, and hanging by his side a heavy sword. What rage, she cried, has seized my husband's mind? What arms are these, and to what use designed? These times want other aids, were Hector here, even Hector now in vain, like Priam would appear. With us one common shelter thou shalt find, on one common fate with us be joined. She said, and with a last salute embraced the poor old man, and by the laurel placed. Polites, one of Priam's sons, pursued by pirates there for safety runs. Through swords and foes, amazed and hurt, he flees, through open courts and open galleries. Him Pyrrhus, urging with his lance, pursues, and often reaches, and his thrust renews. The youth, transfixed with lamentable cries, expires before his wretched parents' eyes, whom gasping at his feet when Priam saw, the fear of death gave place to nature's law, and shaking more with anger than with age, the gods, said he, requite thy brutal rage. As sure they will, barbarian, sure they must, if there be gods in heaven and gods be just, who takes in wrongs an insolent delight, with a son's death to infect a father's sight. Not he whom thou and lying fame conspire to call thee his, not he thy wont desire. Thus used my wretched aid the gods he feared, the laws of nature and of nations heard. He cheered my sorrows, and for sums of gold the bloodless carcass of my Hector sold. Pitied the woes a parent underwent, and sent me back in safety from his tent. This said, his feeble hand a javelin threw, which fluttering seemed to loiter as it flew. Just and but barely to the mark it held, and faintly tickled on the brazen shield. Then Pyrrhus thus, go thou from me to fate, and to my father my foul deeds relate. Now die. With that he dragged the trembling sire, slittering through clotted blood and holy mire. The mingled past his murdered son had made, hauled from beneath the violated shade, and on the sacred pile the royal victim laid. His right hand held his bloody falcon bare, his left he twisted in his hoary hair. Then, with a speeding thrust, his heart he found. The lukewarm blood came rushing through the wound, and sanguine streams disdained the sacred ground. Thus Priam fell, and shared one common fate, with Troy in ashes and his ruined state. He who the sceptre of all Asia swayed, who monarchs like domestic slaves obeyed, on the bleak shore now lies the abandoned king, a headless carcass and a nameless thing. Then, not before, I felt my curdled blood congeal with fear, my hair with horror stood. My father's image filled my pious mind, lest equal years might equal fortune find. Again I thought on my forsaken wife, and trembled for my son's abandoned life. I looked about but found myself alone, deserted at my need, my friends were gone. Some spent with toil, some with despair oppressed, leaped headlong from the heights, the flames consumed the rest. Thus wandering in my way without a guide, the graceless Helen in the porch I spied. Of Vesta's temple there she looked alone, muffled she sate, and what she could, unknown. But by the flames that cast their blaze around, that common bane of Greece and Troy I found. For Ilium burned, she dreads the Trojan sword, more dreads the vengeance of her injured lord. Even by those gods who refused her abhorred, trembling with rage the strumpet on her gourd, resolved to give her guilt the due reward. Shall she triumphant sail before the wind, and leave in flames unhappy Troy behind? Shall she her kingdom and her friends review, in state attended with a captive crew, while unrevenged the good old Priam falls, and Grecian fires consume the Trojan walls? For this the Phrygian fields and Santian flood were swelled with bodies and were drunk with blood. 'Tis true a soldier can small honor gain, and boast no conquest from a woman slain. Yet shall the fact not pass without applause of vengeance taken in so just a cause. The punished crime shall set my soul at ease, and murmuring manes of my friends appease. Thus, while I rave, a gleam of pleasing light spread over the place, and shining heavenly bright, my mother stood revealed before my sight. Never so radiant did her eyes appear, not her own store confessed a light so clear. Great in her charms as when on gods above, she looks and breathes herself into their love. She held my hand, the destined blow to break, then from her rosy lips began to speak. My son, from whence this madness, this neglect of my commands and those whom I protect? Why this unmanly rage? Recall to mind whom you forsake, what pledges leave behind. Look if your helpless father yet survive, or if Ascanius or Creusa live. Around your house the greedy Grecians o'er, and these had perished in the nightly war, but for my presence and protecting care. Not Helen's face nor Paris was in fault, but by the gods was this destruction brought. Now cast your eyes around while I dissolve the mists and films that more lies involve. Purge from your sight the dross and make you see the shape of each avenging deity. Enlighten thus my just commands fulfill, nor fear obedience to your mother's will. Where yon disordered heap of ruin lies, stones rent from stones where clouds of dust arise, amid that smothered Neptune holds his place, below the wall's foundation drives his mace, and heaves the building from the solid base. Look where in arms imperial Juno stands, full in the Scaean gate with loud commands, urging on shore the torty Grecian bands. See, Pallas of her snaky buckler proud, bestrides the tower refulgent through the cloud. See, Jove new courage to the foe supplies, and arms against the town the partial deities. Haste, hence, my son, this fruitful labor end. Haste, where your trembling spouse and sire attend. Haste, and a mother's care your passage shall befriend. She said, and swiftly vanished from my sight, obscure in clouds and gloomy shades of night. I looked, I listened, dreadful sounds I hear, and the dire forms of hostile gods appear. Troy sunk in flames I saw, nor could prevent, and Ilium from its old foundations rent like a mountain ash, which dared the winds, and stood the sturdy strokes of laboring hands. About the roads the cruel axe resounds, the stumps are pierced with oft-repeated wounds. The war is felt on high, the nodding crown now threats a fall and throws the leafy honours down. To the united force it yields though late, and mourns with mortal groans the approaching fate. The roots no more their upper loads sustain, but down she falls and spreads a ruin through the plain. Descending thence, I escaped through foes and fire, before the goddess foes and flames retire. Arrived at home, he, for whose only sake, or most for his, such toils I undertake, the good Anchises, whom by timely flight I purpose to secure on Ida's height, refused the journey, resolute to die, and add his funerals to the fate of Troy, rather than exile and old age sustain. Go you, whose blood runs warm in every vein. Had heaven decreed that I should life enjoy, heaven had decreed to save unhappy Troy. 'Tis sure enough, if not too much for one, twice to have seen our Ilium overthrown. Make haste to save the poor remaining crew, and give this useless corpse a long adieu. These weak old hands suffice to stop my breath. At least the pitying foes will aid my death, to take my spoils and leave my body bare. As for my sepulchre, let heaven take care. 'Tis long since I for my celestial wife, loathed by the gods, have dragged a lingering life, since every hour and moment I expire, blasted from heaven by Jove's avenging fire. This, oft repeated, he stood fixed to die. Myself, my wife, my son, my family, entreat, pray, beg, and raise a doleful cry. What, will he still persist on death resolve, and in his ruin all his house involve? He still persists his reasons to maintain, all prayers or tears, all loud laments or vain. Urged by despair again I go to try the fate of arms resolved in fight to die. What hope remains but what my death must give? Can I without so dear a father live? You term it prudence, what I baseness call. Could such a word from such a parent fall? If fortune please, and so the gods ordain, that nothing should have ruined Troy remain, and you conspire with fortune to be slain, The way to death is wide, the approach is near, for soon relentless pyres will appear, reeking with Priam's blood the wretch who slew the son, inhumane in the father's view. And then the sire himself to the dire altar drew. O goddess mother, give me back to fate. Your gift was undesired and came too late. Did you for this unhappy me convey through foes and fires to see my house a prey? Shall I my father, wife and son behold, weltering in blood each other's arms enfold? Haste, gird my sword, though spent and overcome, till the last summons to receive our doom. I hear thee, fate, and I obey thy call. Not unrevenged, the foe shall see my fall. Restore me to the yet unfinished fight. My death is warning to conclude the night. Armed once again, my glittering sword I wield, while the other hand sustains my weighty shield. And forth I rush to seek the abandoned field. I went, but sad Cloysa stopped my way, and crossed the threshold in my passage lay. Embraced my knees, and, when I would have gone, shewed me my feeble sire and tender son. If death be your design at least, said she, take us along to share your destiny. If any farther hopes in arms remain, this place these pledges of your love maintain. To whom do you expose your father's life, your son's and mine, your now forgotten wife? While thus she fills the house with clamorous cries, our hearing is diverted by our eyes. For while I held my son in the short space betwixt our kisses and our last embrace, strange to relate from young Iola's head, a lambent flame arose, which gently spread around his brows and on his temple fed. Amazed with running water we prepare to quench the sacred fire and slake his hair. But old Anchises, versed in omens, reared his hands to heaven and this request preferred. If any vows, almighty Jove, can bend thy will, if piety can prayers commend, confirm the glad presage which thou art pleased to send. Scarce had he sent when on our left we hear a peal of rattling thunder roll in air. There shot a streaming lamp along the sky, which on the winged lightning seemed to fly. From over the roof the blaze began to move, and trailing vanished in the Aedaean grove. It swept the path in heaven and shone a guide, then in a streaming stench of sulphur died. The good old man with suppliant hands implored the gods' protection and their store adored. Now, said he, my son, no more delay. I yield, I follow where heaven shews the way. Keep, O my country gods, our dwelling place, and guard this relic of the Trojan race. This tender child, these omens are your own, and you can yet restore the ruined town. At least accomplish what your signs foreshow. I stand resigned and am prepared to go. He said, the crackling flames appear on high, and driving sparkles dance along the sky. With Vulcan's rage the rising winds conspire, and near our palace roll the flood of fire. Haste, my dear father, 'tis no time to wait, and load my shoulders with a willing freight. Whatever befalls, your fire shall be my care. One death or one deliverance we shall share. My hand shall lead our little son, and you, my faithful consort, shall our steps pursue. Next, you, my servants, heed my strict commands. Without the walls a ruined temple stands. To Ceres, hallowed once, a cypress nigh, shoots up her venerable head on high. By long religion kept, there bend your feet, and in divided parties let us meet. Our country gods, the relics and the bands, hold you, my father, in your guiltless hands. In me 'tis empire's holy things to bear, red as I am with slaughter new from war, till in some living stream I cleanse the guilt of dire debate and blood in battle spilled. Thus, ordering all that prudence could provide, I clothe my shoulders with a lion's hide, and yellow spoils, then on my bending back the welcome load of my dear father take. While on my better hand the scanews hung, and with unequal paces tripped along. Creusa kept behind, by choice we stray, through every dark and every devious way. I, who so bold and dauntless just before, the Grecian darts and shocks of lances bore, at every shadow now am seized with fear, not for myself but for the charge I bear. Till near the ruined gate arrived at last, secure, and deeming all the danger past, a frightful noise of trampling feet we hear. My father, looking through the shades with fear, cried out, "Haste, haste, my son, the foes are nigh, their swords and shining armor I descry." Some hostile god, for some unknown offense, had sure bereft my mind of better sense. For while through winding ways I took my flight, and sought the shelter of the gloomy night, alas, I lost Creusa, hard to tell if by her fatal destiny she fell, or weary state, or wandering with affright, but she was lost forever to my sight. I knew not or reflected till I meet my friends at Ceres' now deserted seat. We met, not one was wanting, only she deceived her friends, her son, and wretched me. What mad expressions did my tongue refuse? Whom did I not of gods or men accuse? This was the fatal blow that pained me more than all I felt from ruined Troy before. Stung with my loss and raving with despair, abandoned my now forgotten care, of counsel, comfort, and of hope bereft, my sire, my son, my country gods I left. In shining armor once again I sheathed, my limbs not feeling wounds nor fearing death. Then headlong to the burning walls I run, and seek the danger I was forced to shun. I tread my former tracks, to night explore each passage, every street I crossed before. All things were full of horror and affright, and dreadful even the silence of the night. Then to my father's house I make repair, and with some small glimpse of hope to find her there. Instead of her, the cruel Greeks I met. The house was filled with foes, with flames beset, driven on the wings of winds, whole sheets of fire, through air transported to the roofs aspire. From thence to Priam's palace I resort, and search the citadel and desert court. Then unobserved I pass by Juno's church. A god of Grecian had possessed the porch. There Phoenix and Ulysses watch prey, and thither all the wealth of Troy convey, the spoils which they from ransacked houses brought, and golden bowls from burning altars caught. The tables of the gods, the purple vests, the people's treasure and the pomp of priests. A rank of wretched youths with pinioned hands, and captive matrons in long order stands. Then with ungoverned madness I proclaim through all the silent street Croesus' name. Croesus still I call, at length she hears, and sudden through the shades of night appears. Appears no more Croesus nor my wife, but a pale spectre larger than the life. Aghast, astonished, and struck dumb with fear, I stood. Like bristles rose my stiffened hair. Then thus the ghost began to soothe my grief. Nor tears nor cries can give the dead relief. Desist, my much loved lord, to indulge your pain. You bear no more than what the gods ordain. My fate permit me not from hence to fly, nor he, the great controller of the sky. Long wandering ways for you the powers decree, on land labors and at length of sea. Then, after many painful years are past, on Latium's happy shore you shall be cast, where gentle Tiber from his bed beholds the flowery meadows and the feeding folds. There end your toils, and there your fates provide a quiet kingdom and a royal bride. There fortune shall the Trojan line restore, and you for lost Croesus weep no more. Fear not that I shall watch with servile shame the imperious looks of some proud Grecian dame, or stooping to the victor's lust, disgrace my goddess mother or my royal race. And now farewell, the parent of the gods restrains my fleeting soul in her abodes. I trust our common issue to your care. She said, and gliding past unseen in air. I strove to speak, but horror tied my tongue, and thrice about her neck my arms I flung, and thrice deceived on vain embraces hung. Light as an empty dream at break of day, or as a blast of wind she rushed away. Thus having passed the night in fruitless pain, I to my longing friends returned again, amazed the augmented number to behold, of men and matrons mixed, of young and old. A wretched exiled crew together brought, with arms appointed and with treasure fraught, resolved and willing under my command, to run all hazards both of sea and land. The morn began from Ida to display her rosy cheeks, and phosphor lit the day. Before the gates the Grecians took their post, and all pretense of late relief was lost. I yield to fate, unwilling retire, and loaded up the hill convey my sire.